right, welcome back to NostalgiaCast. I'm Jonny Craddock.
And I'm Darin Lundberg.
And today's episode is Swing Kids, 1993 movie directed by Thomas Carter. Is that his name? And before we do that, Darin, let's do a quick recap of last time's episode, which was Stand By Me. That was a movie that I picked. And I picked it because it was a movie that I experienced when I was real little and real late at night. And I really had a connection to it. And so I wanted to revisit it, and so we did, and it was a lot of fun, and I thought it was worth remembering. But what were your thoughts on it?
Yeah, it was worth remembering too. I think we talked about how it was one of the strongest movies that we covered. It doesn't look fantastic. Like, it's not like Orson Welles won't knock your socks off visual-wise, but I don't think the story lent itself to those kind of visuals. I thought it was a very, like our podcast is about, a very nostalgic trip back to our childhoods, back to that more innocent time before all the adulthood kind of started to seep in. So again, very memorable, especially for the way that it really hit on the head, the feel of hanging out with your friends and those times that you remember growing up.
Yeah, definitely. Real quick, I made some improvements to my setup here. So I know we've been having some issues with our sound. And so you encouraged me to go out and buy a microphone. So I did. I know you can't see it, but there is a microphone right in front of me. And so hopefully my sound has improved. So we are still trying to refine all the glitches that we've been experiencing doing this podcast and doing the whole YouTube thing, but we're getting better. We're getting there. So bear with us, stay with us, and eventually we'll get to where we need to be.
Right. And again, the reason why I didn't bother asking you to get a microphone is, Zoom is the new norm. Like, these conference calls are the new norm for people. So when you listen to some podcasts, their audio isn't like knock your socks off fantastic. So I just thought, as long as people can hear us, what's the problem? So
yeah. But I would agree with you that the way the sound is now, it's definitely a lot better. So I'm glad that we have made this improvement.
Yeah, we can at least talk over each other a little bit.
Yeah. I can interrupt more now.
Yeah.
So today we have a guest, and we invited my wife on the show. She's done the show before, but we wanted to have her on again. And she chose the movie Swing Kids. So we'll get into that. We'll bring her on. And before that, let's watch the trailer.
Germany, 1939. A nation declares war on freedom, armed with a powerful secret weapon.
In Germany today, it is our youth who lead the way.
They were trained to obey without question.
Your loyalty is to the Führer above all else.
All except the young rebels they called Swing Kids.
Swing Heil.
Heil, Benny.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Where's the party tonight? Bismarck.
They're really kicking it.
What does it mean?
It's a secret language.
Quiz time. Die? Talk. What they say in Harlem.
It means what it means. You don't know anything about swing, do you?
How do you feel?
It looks to me like we have to go to the bathroom. I'll never be sleazy.
Anyone can be sleazy. All you need is attitude.
Their music bound them together.
No one who likes swing can become a Nazi.
We are closing this pub. Leave immediately.
Until their own country began tearing them apart.
Youth of his sort belong in a work camp.
What do I have to do? Only the same as most boys your age are doing.
Don't you have some marching to do? We didn't want to join, we had to. He had to. What's your excuse? I'm his friend. So am I. You don't see me joining.
Hollywood Pictures presents the story of two friends
You follow my lead like always. We'll get through this.
forced to choose between loyalty
Nazis go anywhere they want, do anything they please, everybody gets out of our way.
and liberty.
What the hell's gotten into you?
You're turning into a Nazi! So what if I am?
Can't you see what's happening? Are you afraid to look? If you side with the Nazis, then we're at war.
So much passion. Swing Kids.
The hell with all of them!
Okay, Swing Kids, 1993, directed by Thomas Carter, the director who did Metro, Save the Last Dance, and Coach Carter. Starring Sean Leonard, Noah Wiley's in there, Christian Bale, Kenneth Branagh, although he's uncredited, he's in there as well. Frank Whaley, and also Barbara Hershey shows up there in the movie as well. So before we get into that, though, we have a guest today, Darin. We have a repeat offender. She's been on our show before. She's my wife, and we wanted to have her back on. So she's back. She joined us for our Labyrinth episode, which was a lot of fun. But real quick, Ruth and we met in Las Vegas, and I remember thinking that whoever I married had to be a lover of film, had to be someone who enjoyed movies as much as I did. And so when I first met her and she started telling me that her dad worked in film, her brothers worked in film, that she had all these screenplays she wanted to write and she wanted to direct these movies. And I was like, whoa, this might be it. This might be the one. And so, you even quoted Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. And at that time, I was kind of going through a phase of watching all these Terry Gilliam movies. And so when you said that, I was like, oh my gosh, this girl really is something, So that was kind of like what sparked our relationship, is our love for film. And anyway, so Ruth, oh, by the way, if you don't know, for our listeners, she's also the person who edits our YouTube videos. So you can thank her for that.
Thank you, Ruth. We appreciate that.
You're welcome.
All right, Ruth. So tell us why you picked this movie and what it means to you.
Well, first off, this is a movie you allowed me to pick. Because we were talking about what movie we should do. I kept, mentioning things. You're like, nah. That'd be something you like. So this is the movie that you let me pick.
Well, the movies you kept picking were movies I didn't really feel like you really had a special connection to. I kept thinking, that's not something you're really fond of, is it? Like, that's not. What? Say it again.
You didn't have a special connection to it. It's all about you. Well, this is a good pick, though. This does sort of encompass our relationship and things that we bonded over, and it's very nostalgic of that era and everything. So
yeah. So what was your history with it? When did you first watch it, and what happened what was your experience like with this movie?
I want to say that I watched it in junior high. I know it came out in like 1993, but I don't think I saw it until I want to say 7th grade, maybe 6th grade. But yeah, it was around that time that I started getting into Frank Sinatra and Louis Armstrong and Nat King Cole and that kind of music. And I remember singing it and just loving the dance and all the energy involved in the dance and the music. And I was already kind of getting into that anyways. And I can't remember a lot from when I first watched it. I just remember loving this movie. And I know I've watched it dozens of times over the years. But yeah, I probably watched it in the video, obviously.
Okay. My history with it, I saw it at like a house party. I don't remember really watching it fully. It was on in the background and I caught glimpses of it here and there. And it wasn't until like maybe 1996, 3 years later, that I actually sat down and watched it all the way through. But I do remember liking the dance sequences and thinking it was a lot of fun. I liked the music that was in it. So that kind of like interests me. But I don't really remember responding to it until, like I say, 3 years later, when I watched it again fully, and I thought, oh, this is pretty good, And then, of course, you and I, when we met, we would go swing dancing quite a bit, and so we watched this movie together, and like I said, we bonded over it, so that was kind of fun. But Darin, so that's our history with it. What's your history with it?
Well, I know I said in the last episode that I hadn't seen this in a while, but watching it again this week, it's another Better Off Dead situation. I was watching it going, you know what? I don't think I've seen this. I think it's one of those things where it's ingrained. I don't know if it's ingrained so much as maybe the movies that I just felt like it was a Dead Poet Society remake. There were a lot of the same beats, a lot of the same like issues and thematic choices, character choices, especially. There's one in the middle where it's like, oh, that's what Sean Leonard did in Dead Poet Society. So, and, coupled with like Sound of Music and, Life is Beautiful and all these movies that you see that have the Nazi kind of point of view, I think it takes a lot from those movies. So it's not like Better Off Dead, like it it's ingrained, like the movie itself, in our brain, so much as the pieces that it takes from and the history that we study. I think I was familiar with that. And so again, it was kind of a fresh experience. And Newsies too. It reminded me of Newsies, especially since there's a lot of dancing and there's Christian Bale in there. Was he addicted to dancing and fighting with other teens, like when he was in his youth? Because that seems to be all he was doing anyway. But so yeah, this is my first experience with it. It was, I kind of went in fresh, and even though I knew what was going on, yeah, it was just kind of a new experience for me. So I'm coming to this, I'm the newbie here. I'm the noob. So
Yeah, I know you mentioned that you didn't have a whole lot to go with as far as the movie and the making of the movie, but so you started to research the actual Swing Kids. What did you find out in your research?
okay. Well, like I said, you guys, Johnny, you mentioned last time that it was you and Ruth bonded over this movie. And so I didn't have that connection to it. So all I could do was study again. I thought the history of it was interesting. It goes back to there was the swing youth, or what do they call it? The Swing Jugend. I think that's how they pronounced it, and probably massacring that. But it was a movement in 1939. I believe it started in Hamburg and moved on to Berlin, where these teens, I think they were ages 14 to 21, instead of joining the Nazi rank, they decided to start like a swing dance kind of movement, where they would, and it's interesting, they would wear their clothes different ways. I know the Nazis tried to get everybody to conform to their point of view and to their look and to their style. And these people, what did they do? They wore, the boys especially, they wore sports jackets. They wore colorful
Like
scarves, suspenders, button-up shirts. They had long hair, like you see at the beginning of the movie, which again, all I could think at the beginning was, man, guys, get a haircut. I don't know how you can see. But like that was the whole point. They walked around in umbrellas. Like you see interviews with the actual Swing Kids, the survivors of the Holocaust, how they prided themselves. And the girls too, they wore short skirts. They had their hair all wavy and done up. They wore, I don't want to say garish, but they wore at least makeup. They wore lipstick. They wore fingernail polish. Again, it was just kind of a thumb in the eye to the Nazis, who wanted everybody to look and sound the same. And so that was their way of rebelling. And they would dance to these Jewish or black jazz singers. So that's why on the soundtrack, you had a lot of Benny Goodman, you had Artie Shaw, you had Duke Ellington, you had Count Basie, I think gets a mention in there. All these, they called it what? The degenerate sound, or Negro music, where the Nazis just thought it was, for some reason they thought, and this is my thing, is the Nazis thought that anything that was talked about freedom or talked about individuality, they kind of thought that was a knock against them, which is, it just tells me that the whole movement and the whole party was just very self-centered. They were egotistical. They were what's the word I'm looking for, where they just weren't sure of themselves. You could tell they were any kind of knock on them, they took that personally. And so that's why they kind of,
triggered.
Yeah, they were triggered. They fought back against things. They're very, immature. I guess that's how. And that's what comes from Hitler. Hitler was a spokesman, and he spoke very well. It's kind of like Branagh in the movie. He speaks in a way that, in these smooth kind of, or Hitler was loud, but he was very forthright, and it would. People would fall for it. They would get brainwashed by it, which is what you see in the movie. And again, this movement for the Swing Kids and the Swing Youth is what they call it. It was a knock. Again, it was another thumb in the eye to the Hitler Youth. It was like they're playing on that. It was kind of making fun of them. So again, that's a very real thing. And again, I don't know. I think it was just a battle against conformity, a battle against the establishment. A lot of the boys that were captured. I know when Goebbels, I think there was or Himmel, one of the guys, there was a crackdown in 1941 or something like that, where they went out and they had everybody arrested, like all in these swing clubs and these joints and these discotheques. They would go in and they would swoop in and arrest everybody and ship them out to concentration camps. The boys would go to one, I think it was called Moringen, and the other went to Ravensbrück, I believe that's the name, Ravensbrück. Was the girl concentration camp. And again, like you see in the movie, they would just disappear, and some of them never, they didn't survive. But it was all a slap in the face to the Nazi party, and that's why, it's very celebrated in history. you go into it and we know all about the Nazis. I thought it was interesting too. I didn't realize that they were banning the music because it was Jewish. I knew everything. They're just so, yeah, they were so, angry about everything, that anything that was against their establishment, they just took as the enemy. And it's a fascinating history. So that's really what I learned. But that's just it in a nutshell. You can obviously, go and research it yourself, but it's just a very fascinating facet of history that the movie, I think, earns points for. I don't know if there's another movie that kind of took that to heart and told the same story.
Yeah. Ruth and I definitely noticed the the political parallels that exist that existed in the movie that are also existing today, and we were like, "That's interesting." I never really thought that we would watch this movie and think that what's happening back then is kind of happening with the cancel culture and the double standards of the today's, So that was kind of like interesting for us to talk about.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ruth. I know you have more to say about that.
Took my thing.
Go ahead.
That's the problem when you live with someone you're going to podcast with and you discuss and talk about stuff. Then they say your minds. No, yeah, I feel like it's watching it was kind of eerie because I never thought I'd be living in a time where I feel like that was actually a realistic possibility, because there is a lot of cancel culture is taking over, and there's a lot of censorship of ideals and people talking about reprogramming people. I mean, we have news anchors talking about that. They got to reprogram Trump supporters and all this stuff. And it's a lot of crazy stuff going on. And you don't want to think that this kind of thing had happened again. But I think that's part of the message of the movie, is if we get complacent about freedom and about free speech and expression, we get complacent about how important that is when we let people try to control it and try to decide who gets to dance how they want to dance and who gets to decide what music's good and what movies are good and what political party is okay and all that stuff. You let somebody start doing that, if we don't fight, slowly over time it just starts whittling away until we know it. You're Nazi Germany, and everybody has been taken off to concentration camps, and you're like, crap, when did that happen? So, I mean, yeah, we're not in Nazi Germany yet. I'm just saying it's kind of eerie.
Yeah, I mean, we're up to the point where there's concentration camps, but what you're talking about, it's just one push. You know what I mean? It's whoever speaks the loudest right now. It's, everybody's just following the biggest party. And that's like Jonny, you said, there's a lot of similarities going on with our world now and the world that we saw in the movie. That's something that I really connected to. But again, even though we're not going out killing, doing mass murders and things like that, we're, we're always one step away from something like that happening. It's scary. We can all be pushed in that direction.
Yeah. Well, the divisiveness is definitely there. The us versus them mentality is there. You should hear the things people say. Democrats about Republicans, Republicans about Democrats. We're a very divided country. It feels like we're on the brink of civil war. I don't know how that would work though, because we literally live all next to each other. It's not like North and South where we can divide the country. We're living amongst our enemy. So it didn't work at all. But not that I'm saying we should have a civil war. I'm just saying it feels like
just one step away, right?
One step away. But yeah, it feels like a lot of people they don't understand the other side. They feel like the other side's brainwashed. And I was saying to Jonny earlier, how do you have a conversation with people that think you're brainwashed? How do you have a conversation with them about why you believe what you believe and why these things are important to you if they already think you're crazy? And what if you also think that person's crazy? So the thing is, essentially, both sides think the other one's totally nuts. So, I mean, somewhere along the line, we lost the ability to respect or appreciate other people's point of views, or to respectfully agree, disagree. Something happened. We used to be where we could talk about stuff and have cool conversations about completely different things with people that were completely different than you. And now it's like, if you don't all agree and believe the same thing, it's hate speech. It's hate speech if you say something opposing to their ideas. And yeah, it starts to get, it's like extreme. So anyway.
Yeah, it's all pretty muddled there. We were just talking the other night about the left thinks that they're right, the right thinks that they're right. So who's right? Like, no, it's just screaming at a wall, and that's really. And you see that between Peter and Thomas in this movie. They're just butting heads, and Peter's literally like, "Can you hear yourself?" It's like you've just bought into the whole idea. And again, that's something you jive with. It's the thing that, and again, we'll talk about it. The thing that I really liked about the movie, the thing I like most, is how you can see the gradual progression of everybody and how deep they get into it. First they get the haircuts, and then they start wearing the clothes, and then they start getting brainwashed, because all they're hearing are this Nazi propaganda, which, again, what is it about Nazi propaganda that's so disgusting and makes me feel like I need to take a shower? It's like, I don't know what the
program to think that.
Yeah. The movie has that feel to it, and I really like that. It's all about getting, buying into, the attraction of that Nazi party, which is scary. Like, you can see your friends kind of disappear into it, and all the politics that we're talking about can't be solved in a 1 hour podcast. It's something that you have to go on and on and on.
Well, let's move on then.
Yeah, absolutely. We could talk the rest of the time.
You got one more point you want to make, Ruth? All right, one more point. Go ahead.
About how at one point, what's his name? I forget his name. The Arvid, is that his name?
Yep.
Yeah, Arvid.
Frank Whaley.
He even mentioned that, you're wearing the same haircuts, you're wearing the same clothes, you're learning the same things, you're doing the same stuff. It's almost like being a swing kid, isn't it? Like, he was kind of comparing the two situations, where what they were doing in a lot of ways was similar.
Yeah, well, that's what Branagh was saying when he's got Peter in the car, right? He's like, you need to feel like you're a part of something. Like, we're out, you can be a part of something. And you just think, well, he is a part of something. And that's what happens at the end when he's fighting with Thomas. It's interesting. It's just different ideologies. It's just which one is the least disgusting. And so, again, I thought that
way.
Yeah, I thought the movie got that very well across.
Brennan's talking about, you should know what you're getting into before you get involved in something. And literally, that applies to the Nazi Party too. I mean, he's talking about delivering books for the bookseller, but it applies to, what the Nazis want them to do, and spy on their family. He's delivering those boxes of ashes, not knowing that that's what he's delivering. So just a lot of irony in it.
Yeah. All right. Well, music is a big thing in this movie. So let's talk about the music, because when this movie came out in 1993, there was kind of like a big boom of swing music. And I remember, like, all the high schools and the college campuses, they all had these like swing dances that they would hold every Tuesday and Thursday, or even on the weekends as well. So you could go swing dancing at any time during the week. And it was like, it was big. It was like you get hundreds of kids showing up to these swing dances, and it was a lot of fun. But do you remember that swing boom, Darin? Were you a part of that?
Yeah, you're going to have to, I can hear the music in my head, but you're going to have to remind me of the band names. I kind of forget about all those, but.
Yeah, the ones that I can think of are like Brian Setzer Orchestra and Cherry Poppin' Daddies and Mighty Mighty Boss Stones, Aquabats, Goldfinger is one of them.
Was Blues Traveler part of that? Did they count as the swing?
Yeah, it's not really swing music. It's more like bluegrass.
Okay.
But anyway, did you go to any of those dances when you were younger, when it kind of was the thing to do?
No, other than church dances, those are the only, I didn't attend any kind of, and I don't think there's a lot of swing. I know there's a lot of electric sliding, but not a lot of swing dance.
Well, I used to go to those dances all the time, and that's Ruth and I went to those dances together, and we would do these, cool. I'd flip her around my back and throw over my shoulder, and she'd do backflips. And she was really little, so it was easy to throw her around. But that was something in the movie that I really liked. I enjoyed watching it because it was like it brought back memories of me, flipping Ruth around and all that kind of stuff. And our wedding, our reception was kind of like a 1920s theme, and we just had swing music playing, and we just, your wedding dress was a flapper gown, and I wore like a fedora and like had like, so it was kind of fun to
Darin was one of your groomsmen.
Yeah, he was one of my best men. Yeah.
Then all the pictures.
I don't remember. Ruth, did you have one of those giant feathers in your hair and the headband?
I don't.
You had the headband. You had the
I
headband.
have that, but I don't think I put a giant feather in mine. I don't remember. I have to look at the picture.
Your bridesmaids did, though. They had the feathers in their headbands.
They did, yeah. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Well, that's fun. I'm glad we could talk about your wedding day. No, but the dances, the dance sequences were very energetic. I know, the camera's always moving. They're very dynamic. You kind of get swept up in that, and you get the feel of it. Did you guys think that the dancing, like Sean Leonard's dancing, Christian Bale's dancing, do you think the dancing was good, or is it more of a footloose style of, it's not necessarily fancy footworking or good looking, but it's like you can tell that they just feel it, and they just, the movements come from their feeling. What did you think of the dancing?
Well, I think it is, like you say, freestyle, and it is kind of like you feel the music, but there is technique to it too. You have to know the steps. You have to know what you're doing. Because I did a lot of swing dancing as in choreography and plays that I've been in, and so you actually have to know the steps. You have to know the moves, even though it looks organic. It's actually rehearsed.
Yeah.
What do you think, Ruth?
Well, yeah, you can definitely go freestyle and get all kooky with it. When you know all the steps, you can kind of just do your own thing. That's generally what I do when I just dance by myself, is I throw in jitterbug and stuff like that. Just how I generally dance. But yeah, there's moments where like they're rocking out to the music in the dance hall. There's one time where the guy just like almost like he's convulsing, but he's like half doing dance moves while he's doing it. The girl's looking at him like, what is wrong with me? Like towards the end, like his big final dance thing, he's kind of dancing all by himself in sort of like this weird, like emotional, powerful, kind of drunk man kind of a way. And he's doing it by himself. So it doesn't quite look the same when you have a partner. It has more of a sense of purpose. It feels like it's more choreography, but when you're doing it by yourself, it kind of looks sporadic and like you're having a seizure. But that kind of music, it makes you want to move. So that's one of the things I like about it.
Yeah, watching it again this time, that's the one thing I thought was this movie needs more of the dancing. Like I kind of felt like a lot of the Nazi stuff was getting old. I was getting tired of it. And I know you need that for the story, and you need it for the emotional impact at the end. So I understand why it has to be there.
More swinging, less goose stepping.
Right? Exactly. Yeah, more swinging. More swinging and less, Nazi propaganda. Okay.
Right.
I thought it was good amount of dancing / story. I think because the music was throughout the movie, I kind of didn't notice they weren't constantly dancing. I mean, it could turn into a musical, and they could be dancing while they're having these conversations. Swing Kids a musical. I'd see that. That'd be interesting.
Well, what did you guys think of the all-American cast? Like everybody had an American accent.
Yeah, I wanted to point that out for sure, because instantly I was like, why do some people have German accents and some people don't? Like, what's the deal here? What's going on?
They're more German than the others.
What was that?
They're more German than the others. They're pure. They're Aryan. The other guys, they're like mixed or something.
See, what I thought was maybe it was because they were trying to defy the whole German culture, and they were trying to adopt the American Western civilization type as a culture. So they were trying to not have the accents. That's how I wrote it off. Like maybe they're trying to be more American.
Yeah.
I think you're giving them more credit.
It's just silly that they don't have German accents. They're born and raised in Germany. You're going to have a German accent.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you talk about, reconciling. Well, I guess that's what it meant. But there have been other movies like, Three Musketeers, where nobody has a French accent. There's Enemy at the Gates, where nobody has a German accent and nobody has a British accent. I think it's just, maybe it's the American, they didn't want to have to try to pull off fake German accents and have it be distracting. Like it kind of would take you out of the story. I just thought, and I agree with that, but it takes you a while. It took me a while, at least, to kind of get it, because why does everybody sound so? Are we in America? I know it said Hamburg, but are we in America? Like, what's going on? And then, like you said, Johnny, it's like, I don't know. That's what they were doing. Like in this swing youth, that's why they adopted swing. They loved the American lifestyle. They wanted that freedom. They wanted that individuality. And so they adopted a lot of American slang, but they didn't talk with American accents. I just thought it was interesting. You say that, but then there's a part of the end where, Thomas and his whole gang, they break in, like you talked about, Ruth, with Peter, how he's just dancing at the club, and they all break in. But then you hear the Germans go, "Get in line, get out of the truck." And there's no German accents. Like, why would the Germans... I get why the swing, like, that could be an excuse. Like, the swing kids themselves would adopt American accents to kind of another slap in the face. But then why would the Germans who are trying not to conform, why would they have English accents? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So every time
not to teach people how to speak like a German.
That's right.
Accents are hard.
And then Branagh, I don't know what kind of accent he was doing. Like, sometimes he sounded German, sometimes he sounded British, sometimes he sounded American. It was like, what's going on? Like, to me, it was very distracting, because, you would get, okay, I get it. I'm getting into the groove. They talk like Americans. But then Kenneth Branagh would show up and do 3 different accents, and we go, what's happening? And then
maybe that's why he didn't want to be credited for it.
Yeah. Which I liked. Like, it's interesting because Kenneth Branagh is probably the biggest name at the time. And I liked the story goes that he was like, I'm not going to take top billing, even though it's a marketing ploy, because I'm not the star. It's these kids. It's Christian Bale. It's Sean Leonard. It's Frank Whaley. It's Noah White. They're the stars. Why would I be billed above them? But again, like I said, Branagh would show up and do a multitude of accents. And then I get in the groove. And the Germans would pop up and they talk in complete American accents, so it kept throwing me off. It was like, I get what's going on, but they're not deciding. I don't know. I just thought it would have been more interesting if it was maybe a foreign film. Like, a lot of the dialogue lent itself to, well, that would sound better in a German accent than American. Like, when Peter is talking to his mom, Barbara Hershey, like, a lot of their dialogue is like, this would sound a lot better if they spoke in German accents, because it sounds a little stilted. As even regular dialogue. And even then, it would have made the swing kid stuff a little more exotic and help it stand out a little more. I don't know. As far as the style of the movie goes, I thought it was a more dry. It was well intentioned. The movie was very well intentioned, had a good things on its mind. And Ruth, like you talked about, there's a lot of irony and crisscrossing of ideologies. But at the end of the day, it's a very dry looking movie. And I don't know if like we talked about before, Johnny, if that's a purpose or it's a flaw.
Okay, well, since you kind of like delved into the actors, let's go into the actors a little deeper and talk about each one of them. I want to start with Sean Leonard, since he's kind of the star. I think this is one of the few movies that I think he is good in. I'm not really a big fan of his. I don't know that I've seen anything I really, really like. But he's decent in this movie. I believe him in this movie. I can say that he tried. He gave it his all, and so that to me is commendable. But there's this one moment in the movie that he just, I don't know if it was direction or what, but when he first opens the box of the ashes and grabs the wedding ring out of the ashes, there's a moment like his reaction is just, it's so out of place and out of character that it's just kind of, you go, what was that? It just doesn't fit. But other than that one moment, the rest of the movie, he's pretty good.
Was it the slow-mo? The thing that I laughed at was he looks at the ring, goes, ah, and it like does this weird slow-mo, and he gets up and like, what was that? Like, who made that choice?
Totally out of place.
Something exploded and hurt his ears or something.
Right.
But what did you guys think of Sean Leonard?
Ruth, go ahead.
Well, you know what? I like and don't like him at the same time. It's kind of a strange feeling. I mean, he puts energy into it. And so like, you got to give him credit for the fact that like, he really tries to go for it. He tries to put the energy into it. He tries to commit to the character. But for the most part, I think he is playing himself or he just thinks he has to overact everything. And I'm just sort of judging that off of, the handful of movies that he did around that time, like Much Ado About Nothing and The Poets Society and those kind of movies where like he went for like the passion but he did it almost all the time. So even the times where you didn't need it, he was still doing it. So I feel like it kind of kills those powerful moments if you're always like, up top and big. And sometimes just a whisper can be as powerful as a scream or over the top yelling. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I kind of thought, I've never minded him. I don't think he's terrible. I don't think he's, and again, we love Keanu Reeves, but he's not like that level of, you can tell, well, maybe he is. I think a lot of his actions are stilted. It doesn't seem natural. It seems like he knows he's on camera a lot of the time. And I've noticed this in every performance he does. It's like, it doesn't flow, like, especially during the dance sequences. I know he could, he was feeling the emotion, but it still felt like he was going through the motions. I don't know if that makes any sense. So he's fine as a lead. I just think he's kind of vanilla. I think, Christian Bale's more interesting as an actor now. I don't know if he was that interesting back then. But maybe that's our next. Johnny, what do you think? Do you agree with that on Robert Sean Leonard? Do you have any?
I see what you guys are saying, but when I compare him to other movies that he's done, this is the one that he's the best in for me. Because you're comparing to Much Ado and you're comparing to Dead Poets, and he's fine in Dead Poets, but there's still some, like you say, you can tell he's acting. In this one, it's a level up above those movies. So that's why I think this is his best performance for me anyway.
Well, he had to step up because he's the main star, right? He's not quite a background player. I could see that. I do agree with you. He acquitted himself well. He's not like, you don't walk out of it going, oh my gosh, this is Daniel Day-Lewis and Lincoln. That's, you don't walk away doing that, but he's capable. It's fine. He gets across the emotions he needs.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And Christian Bale for me was fine. He played the role fine. I don't really have much to say about him because I just think of him as Batman whenever I see him. So it's hard for me to see anything other than that.
Ruth, what did you think of Christian Bale?
Well, Johnny, I should point out that Johnny constantly told the kids that, hey, Batman's in this movie. And the boys would walk in and be like, where's Batman? And be like, see, he's there. He's that guy. The guy hitting the guy with a stick. And they're like, oh, why is Batman hitting the guy with a stick? And we're like, no, he's not Batman in the movie. It's the guy who becomes Batman later in the other movies. But he just kept mentioning it. So,
well, the thing you have to remember is that kids are stupid.
No, very smart. Christian Bale, yeah. I like watching this movie because it kind of reminds me of the whole Newsies phase and like when he was starting acting and just how different he is from how far he's come since, those days. And even in the Newsies, you could tell he wasn't a great dancer. And there's moments where he sort of fumbles. And I feel like you kind of see that here and there in this movie, but not as bad. But yeah, I feel like he's grown a lot as an actor. And I think for the parts that he was doing at the time, it worked to be a little green. It worked to be, to play the characters he was playing. And then, later on for him to evolve into like American Psycho and
The Fighter, stuff like that.
Like stuff like that, where like he evolved into like a real actor and became this deeper and more multifaceted in how he did everything. So yeah, it is kind of fun to look back and watch him in his like beginning phase and see him kind of being a little bit over the top. And I especially enjoyed the part where he's pretending that he got stabbed or shot whatever so they can steal the radio, and he's like being way over the top. And obviously this man has not been shot, but I liked his on purpose bad acting. That was good. That was fun.
Right. Well, interesting story. My wife is not really, savvy into, movie stars and directors and writers and all that, as much as I am, as much as we all are. And so it didn't occur to her, like in Newsies, when she watched that as a teen, she had a big crush on him. You know, just because he's the lead and he's, you know, Newsies, he's good. He carries himself well. I agree with you. I don't know if he's a great dancer, but he's so meticulous in his performances and how he learns stuff that you could tell that he's learned the steps. It's not as much that he's, you know, flows from him as much as he knows everything by heart. But then, you know, me being a big fan of Batman and the Christopher Nolan movies, like she didn't realize that was Christian Bale until we watched Newsies as a family. And she's like, wait, that's Batman? I'm like, yeah. And I've had a crush on him forever. So, well, that's great, you know. But the thing with Newsies, the thing with Swing Kids is I agree with you. He's not quite as ferocious. He's not quite as meticulous as he is now. It's weird watching him like in Newsies and here trying to be a heartthrob, and then Little Women in '94 that he was a part of, trying to see him be heartthrobby. And I mean this with all respect, there's something off-putting about Christian Bale. I don't know what it is. You can see it in his face. Like when he becomes a Nazi, it's like, yeah, that would figure. Like he would become like a thug kind of, even though you can tell he's a good person, right? But you know, again, seeing him put his body through, you know, such the rigmarole and putting his health at risk with the machinist, with the fighter, and then seeing him put on the pounds for Vice, for Batman. You know, he's really ferocious performances. He's really believable. He's one of today's best actors because he will go places that normal actors won't go. And so I'm trying to come around in a circle here. Seeing him play a heartthrob doesn't really work. When he was cast. And again, Empire of the Sun is one of the great youth performances, but again, he's a youth there. He wasn't fully formed. When he was cast in American Psycho, that was perfect for him. There was something just not right about him, even though he was a good looking, smooth kind of operator. And then when he got cast as Batman, I just think, you know, you take the E away from Patrick Bateman, it spells Batman, you know, that kind of thing. When I heard he was cast for Batman, that's a perfect fit because Bruce Wayne, to me, is a psychopath. Like he's a broken man. And when I cast Christian Bale, I thought he's going to be able to play, as long as the writing is good, which it was. As long as the writing is good, Bale is going to be able to play him as the broken man, but as someone you can cheer for and you can believe in. And that's the Christian Bale that I think that I really adore. The guy that's not, you can't trust him. There's just something about him that's just, this guy can go off and he can kill me at any second. But
would you say that Christian Bale shows up in Swing Kids?
Not, you know, when he becomes the Nazi, it's still, like I said, the movie's dry, and so a lot of the performances are maybe not one note, but maybe two note. Okay. Branagh's performance is a very three-dimensional performance because the way that he speaks, you like him, but he's threatening. Like whenever he says, it's nice, but it's a threat. You know, something is off. And so with Bale having that side come out of him, I just think it's more playing at something than actually feeling it. The difference between a Ben Affleck Batman and a Christian Bale Batman is Ben Affleck, you can tell that he's acting, that he's playing angry, he's playing conflicted, but if it's Bale doing it, he is conflicted, he is angry. It comes from somewhere inside. And so the Christian Bale in this movie, even though you can see signs of his future self, he's not quite there. He's still more Robert Sean Leonard than he is, American Hustle Christian Bale. Yeah, that's what I think anyway.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So I think that the standout performance in this movie is Frank Whaley. I think the character Arvid, maybe because he's the character that stands up for what he believes in, and he has a stronger voice than the other characters. I would say. I think for me, also because he played guitar, musician, I like that. So because of who he is, the character, I latched onto him, and his performance stood out to me. And during his little speech in the club, I felt something. And even though Frank Whaley's had a great career, somewhat successful career, this performance I think is one of his best.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. The only thing that kind of took away from his performance for me is, again, from the moment he turned, and the longer you spend time with him, and then there's a scene where the youth, the Hitler youth, they beat him up, as he's trying to dance, and Thomas is kind of going at him. The more that he's in the movie, the more that I could think this kid's going to kill himself. There's nowhere for him to go. He's either going to be captured or he's going to have to take the easy way out. And again, when he kills himself, that's very Dead Poet Society. Like I said at the beginning, that's Robert Sean Leonard in Dead Poet Society. It's the same kind of thing where there's an establishment that he can't fight against, and so the only way he can do it is kind of say, screw you, like this is all I can do, is I can just take myself out of the equation. So I agree with you. It's a good performance. It's a stand-up performance. Ruth, what did you think of Frank Whaley?
I thought he was really good. Yeah, I think it's funny you're saying you're like, he's gonna kill himself. I mean, in some ways, yeah, it does make sense. I think if he's feeling backed into a corner and he's feeling like he doesn't know his friends anymore and he's feeling alone and isolated, then yeah, I can get that. At the same time, I feel like suicide is a very selfish act and a very cowardly act, personally. And so I feel like what people never think about when people think about killing themselves, they never think about how it's going to affect everyone else around them and what does to everybody else and the effect it leaves. And it's quite traumatizing for everybody else. And then, I mean, so yeah, he's thinking he's getting out of the situation, whatever, but really he's not. He's just making things worse for everyone else around him. And, I think that just compacted things for the Peter character, because, I mean, sort of the glue of their group, whether you realize it or not, was Arvid. Because even though Peter and, oh my gosh.
Thomas
were like buddy and best friends. In a lot of ways, Arvid was sort of like the commonality between them. Like they all sort of shared the same thing together. And really it was Arvid who was the expert in it. And they were kind of sort of following his lead. Even though like you might not have seen it that way, Arvid was more, in a sense, as far as the Swing Kid things go, the leader of that group. And then having him gone, that sort of broke apart that aspect of the relationship, the bigger gap. But I don't know, that's just how I saw it.
Do you think they dealt with this, in Dead Poet Society when, he kills himself, what was his name? Neil. When Neil kills himself in Dead Poet Society, that's the rest of the movie is a fallout of that. It's all people get more mad at Robin Williams' character because, they pushed him to do this. But did you feel, I don't know if I felt this personally. And again, maybe I'll take it back about, him kind of thumbing. There's a lot of thumbing noses and jabbing thumbs and eyes, in this movie. But, I guess I could see him killing himself when I could predict that. It's because maybe I've seen too many movies. A lot of the time it's like, well, this might happen because I've seen this movie and that might happen. Mm-hmm. Do you think, though, that in this movie, when he kills himself, that it deals with it? Because it doesn't affect Thomas that much, obviously. You'd think it would, but he kind of brushes it off. And he even has a scene with Peter where he's like, I know that Arvid's death is affecting you, but you got to let it go. Do you think they dealt with that well in the movie?
The effects of him passing? I think they did a better job than they did in Dead Poets in some way. I don't know. I think they did okay. They could have done better, but I'm not quite sure what they could have done.
Right. To me, it just felt more like a story point, like a check that they were trying to mark off and get to the next one. What do you think, Johnny?
I can see that, but I thought it was handled okay. I thought it worked overall, so I was okay with it.
Well, obviously you felt something when he died. James Horner's music kind of swells. And it's funny that I didn't realize it was James Horner doing the music until an hour in. But during this death scene, I was like, oh, this is James Horner.
When I saw that, I knew you were going to mention it.
Right. I don't have anything against James Horner personally. It's just he composed my favorite movie, obviously. But it's just, some composers, you can absolutely tell that it's them because they have a lot of signatures that they go for. So, but for the most part, it's very restrained. A score.
Okay, is there anything else that anybody wants to bring up that we might have forgotten before we move on to the worth remembering or worth remake?
I'm sure there is, but
well, while Ruth is looking, the only other thing, again, I mentioned something about Dead Poet Society. The part at the end when he goes, swing Heil, that's very "Oh Captain, My Captain" from Dead Poet Society, and the music swells, and I think it's Maurice Jarre doing the music in Dead Poet Society, but it had the same kind of feel. It's, it's again, James Horner going, this is my Maurice Jarre moment, trying to do that. So again, I just thought it was interesting. Like the beats that the movie took, other movies that it took its beats from, I thought were interesting. Like I said, I thought the movie was kind of dryly handled, but again, if you've seen enough movies, I don't mean to sound again like a snob, which I usually try not to do, but if you've seen enough, this movie feels paint by numbers in a way, even though it does some things really well.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can see what you're saying. I think that's sort of the problem you run into when you try to follow the magic formula when you're writing a story or you're doing a film or you're writing a song. Anytime you're trying to fit the formula of what's considered like the best way to do things, if you do it right, people won't see that you're following the steps and that you're following the arc.
If the
but if
colors
you
are pretty enough, you don't notice the
yeah, exactly.
right.
Otherwise, then it will feel like it's very written and you can predict, oh yeah, he's going to kill himself, because that's how it works in these kind of movies. And yeah, you make a very good point. It is very Dead Poet Society-ish in a lot of different ways.
Which there's nothing, that's not inherently negative. Dead Poet Society works, so you want to have a movie that kind of hits those same beats, to kind of ring the bell at the box office. The only other thing I wanted to mention, I'm sorry, I say that it's your show, but then I feel like I'm doing most of the talking, like I'm taking over a lot of it. The last thing I want to mention, it's weird seeing Chris Meledandri's name as a producer, the guy that's CEO of Illumination Animation. So it's weird seeing his name as a producer on this. Like, oh, so I could, he goes from this to Minions. I could totally see.
There's a gap.
Yeah.
That's funny. All right, Ruth, you know how the show works. So since you picked this movie, you go ahead and tell us what your thoughts are first.
Well, for me, it's worth remembering just because it encapsulates the whole 90s tween revival. For me, I can't think about that whole era, like my junior high and high school age, without thinking of Swing Kids and movies like it. There were a lot of movies that featured the swing music and the big band music at the time, and so I like it for that. I guess if they made a remake, I don't know. I don't know that I wouldn't be against it. I do love this movie in like as a whole, but it's the kind of movie that I enjoyed. I like it. I'm nostalgic for it. But if they made a remake, I wouldn't be enraged or angry. I wouldn't be like, Ghostbusters, like what? Or Back to the Future or anything like that, where they make a remake and you're like, why? But so yeah, it's kind of hard to say. It's kind of in the middle. I'm nostalgic for it, and I'm perfectly happy with the way it is, even with its flaws. I'm used to those flaws. I'm used to seeing those actors play the characters that way. It's part of the movie's like charm in a weird way. You know what I mean? Like I'm used to Sean Leonard being over the top and a little bit silly. I'm used to it being the way it is. So in that way, I say it's worth remembering, but it wouldn't kill me if they made a remake. So.
Yeah.
So I'm undecided.
I thought you said worth remembering.
I think since you're nostalgic for it, I think that would kind of lean that way. And there's no problem. Absolutely lean that way. As far as my opinion goes, I think I've mentioned it already. I think I don't have the personal connection like you guys have to the swing dancing. I don't, like I said, this is the first time really experiencing the movie. And just to repeat something that I said, I think it would be more interesting if they remade it as a movie that was in a German language, where it was German characters, that when they talked English, which and again in history they would do that again as a slap in the face to the Nazi party, it would be more standoutish. The swing dancing would be more, like I said, exotic. It would be more of something to latch onto. And there's again nothing wrong with the filmmaking. It's just very dry. Thomas Carter, the director, he did a fine job. I just think that there would be a more sensitive way to do it, a more intimate way to do the story. So for me, it's worth a remake.
Okay. For me, I enjoy this movie. I really enjoyed the music aspect of it. And I like watching the dancing. I mentioned to Ruth after we watched it that the one thing I wanted to see more of was the swing dancing. I wanted to focus more on that. And so if they were to remake it, I would, hope that they would like put more emphasis on the swing dancing and the moves and the techniques that's involved and all that stuff. Because that was the fun part for me. Like I said, the Nazi propaganda part wasn't fun. I remember getting bored and thinking, okay, go back to the swing dancing.
Nazis aren't supposed to be fun.
Yeah.
If Nazis are fun, then we have a problem.
Good job, Johnny. Way to vibe with the feel of the point of the movie there. Good job.
Yeah. So for me, I mean, I'm kind of like you, Ruth. I'm kind of on the fence here. I think it's worth remembering in some aspects, but I can see them remaking it, and I can see it, being told in a better way and shot a better way and all that stuff. But I have to lean towards worth remembering because of the fondness I have for the movie and the feel that it gave me, watching it again this time and thinking back to when we saw it together.
Mm-hmm.
So worth remembering. But barely worth remembering.
We should remake it. How about that? It's worth remembering unless we remake it, because we could do it.
Hey, right? we didn't mention this. You actually wrote a screenplay about swing dancing. So did this movie kind of spark that for you?
Amongst others, yeah. It was that was my first screenplay. My first thing I actually finished, because I was always writing. That's the other thing we didn't talk about. We didn't talk about the writing. So I've always been a writer, but I couldn't finish things. So I'd always like start something and then go back and revise the first couple chapters over and over and over and over again. And it was Johnny that made it possible for me to finish something. He just said, don't revise, just keep going. Doesn't matter if it sucks, just go all the way to the end. And when you're done at the end, then you can go back and revise. And that was good advice and really hard for me to do at first. But yeah, the screenplay was called To Jive, and it's pretty much about these two friends that are neighbors that both were really into swing dancing and started a swing club at their school, and then all the little love triangle romance weird stuff that goes on.
All right, cool. Well, Ruth, thanks for joining us. We're glad we had you to look at instead of just each other.
Well, what other things do you have on the horizon, Ruth? I know last time we talked about your book series. How's everything coming along?
Yes, last time, how many years ago was that? Like 4, 5, 6?
20 years.
No, 20 years. Last time we were talking about my book coming out, third book coming out, and now we're still talking about the third book coming out. But yeah, I am very close to finally releasing book 3 of the Children of Cain series. Going to be called The Decree. I have no set date, but it's going to happen someday. So there you go. Sorry, that's all I do.
Well, cool. Thanks again for joining us. Darin, we talked about doing a top 3 list of movies. What you mentioned, it was movies that sparked ideas for other movies or something
movies
like
that spawned other movies, other similar minded movies. Yeah.
Okay. So we can come back in our outro and talk about that. But so let's take a break and we'll come back.
All right.
Hey! It don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing. Do I?
Yeah, swinging.
Oh, growling.
All right, we're back. We want to thank Ruth for joining us. That was a lot of fun to have her on again. So,
yep.
And like we mentioned, she is our YouTube video editor. So she can edit out whatever she doesn't like. She can make herself look better than she thinks she looked. But anyway, thanks for coming on, Ruth. We really appreciate it. So for the outro topic today, we talked about how this movie, Swing Kids, reminded us of other movies like Dead Poet Society and movies of the like. So we wanted to kind of make a list of movies that maybe one movie kind of impacted the filmmaking world, and it kind of, whether they were good or bad, we can talk about movies that were similar to those movies. Did you want to talk a little bit about what sparked this conversation, what sparked this idea?
Yeah, well, again, it was like watching Swing Kids and thinking, oh, that's Dead Poet Society. Oh, that's Dead Poet Society. Oop, that's Dead Poet. It kind of took me but Dead Poet Society kind of gets dinged now for me because I think seeing that seeing it in Swing Kids, seeing it kind of repurposed in School Ties, Scent of a Woman in a way, that kind of thing. It kind of leaves a bad taste in your mouth the more that it kind of gets, what's the term for it? Too much, not enough butter spread across too much bread, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it reminded me too, the big one obviously is Die Hard, and how that all of a sudden inspired, because it had such an impact and was so good. All of a sudden you had Die Hard on a ... movies. You had Speed, you had Air Force One, you had Sudden Death, you had Passenger 57, you had all these, and even the Die Hards the Die Hard sequels were kind of rip-offs of that. So that's kind of what it wanted to spark me. So I texted you, I was like, well, let's talk about that a little bit. What were some of the movies? What was the movie that you thought inspired maybe too many kind of like-minded movies?
Well, when you mentioned it, the movie that comes to mind is Pulp Fiction. And that's because when Pulp Fiction came out, it kind of changed the game a little bit. A lot of movies started trying to copy it. So you saw movies that started doing the nonlinear format. You saw movies that, had the gritty, the crazy dialogue, and they tried really hard to be Tarantino. Some movies were successful and some weren't. Yeah. But the ones that I could think of that were similar to Pulp Fiction, in my mind, were successful at it. And so I wanted to mention these real quick. And that's the first one I thought of was Boondock Saints. It had the nonlinear format. It had the two characters that were kind of, playing off each other, and it had the over the top violence, and it had the kind of like stylistic filmmaking, which was, what Pulp Fiction kind of made famous as well. So I thought that was a good pick, Boondock Saints. And then obviously I think this is pretty obvious. This would be a pick of mine, is Snatch. Because I loved Guy Ritchie, and I think Snatch also follows the same format. It has the like I say, the wild style filmmaking. It has the crazy characters, and it has the violence. So that also stands out in my mind. And then I picked Memento, mainly because of the nonlinear format. Obviously, that's what Memento is famous for. Not that it's like Pulp Fiction, but it has that, it tells the story in reverse. And so that's why I picked that movie. But there's a movie out there called The Rules of Attraction, which Roger Avery, the guy who helped write the stories for Pulp Fiction, kind of went off and made this other movie. And this movie, I would say, didn't work, because it was, even though there were aspects about this movie that I liked, I thought he tried way too hard to be Pulp Fiction-y in this movie that isn't a Pulp Fiction type movie. It didn't have the same type of characters, didn't have the, it was, I don't know, it just didn't work for me. And so those first three that I mentioned worked, but Rules of Attraction I don't think worked as far as I'm trying to copy Pulp Fiction.
Right. Even though Avery, I know he helped Tarantino write the stories for Pulp Fiction. I think it's more of a, if he's not there, if Tarantino's not there to help, it comes off as kind of trying to be Tarantino instead of.
Yes, that's what it felt like. Yeah.
Well, I picked, it's been on my mind for a while. I picked The Dark Knight as far as a movie that spawned a bunch of movies. I know that it didn't start the comic book movie craze. Batman Begins, I think, had a big hand in that. You had the X-Men movie started out, Blade started out, but then Batman Begins, I think, inspired a lot of the MCU, because if you read any of the interviews from Jon Favreau, he talks a lot about how he wanted these movies to be like Batman Begins. And even the first Iron Man has the same plot skeleton, because famously they didn't have a script and they mostly improvised their stuff. So at least the bare bones of a plot was there. But as far as The Dark Knight goes, that's the movie, when it crossed the $1 billion mark, all of a sudden people wanted to be The Dark Knight. It was before the MCU was really, Iron Man debuted the same summer. So it was before the Avengers, was even a thing on people's minds. And Batman, unless it's Adam West, he's dark and gritty. That's the thing that I think people get wrong about most comic book movies, is Batman, the character, is a dark and gritty, psychologically spiky character that lends himself to a crime drama, to a gritty movie. And I think people took that as the wrong lesson. They're like, oh, to be great, we need to have dark and gritty movies, which is something, thankfully, that the MCU doesn't do. The MCU has its own, they're fun and they're lighthearted, and again, they have their own issues. But when Dark Knight came out, all of a sudden, like Man of Steel came out after that, The Amazing Spider-Man, those movies came out after that. And me personally, I think that's the wrong tone to take. Dark and gritty doesn't lend itself to every superhero movie. I know that David Goyer, who helped write Batman Begins and Dark Knight, he wrote a Flash script that was very, in tune, but they didn't the Warner Brothers didn't want that. I think they wanted something more psychological, that's not the Flash. Superman from the beginning is not psychological. He's the demigod. He's the inspiration. He's, I don't want to gatekeep and say that all he can be is fun, but I don't think that the dark and gritty approach with Man of Steel worked. I don't think that the dark and gritty approach that Amazing Spider-Man took, and again, a lot of the shots are similar, a lot of the lighting compositions are similar. I don't recognize a dark and gritty Peter Parker. I know that people wanted, to recognize him. This is who I am. I'm not the goofy Sam Raimi Peter Parker. I'm the dark and gloomy skateboard riding, totally awesome dude on the inside Peter Parker, which is not, I don't think it lends himself to that character. And so as far as going dark and gritty, and again, going from that, and we're having, Zack Snyder's Justice League being rated R for violence and language. That's what people want from their comic book movies, to be taken seriously. I think, you talk about the positive stuff with Pulp Fiction having movies that kind of rid on its coattails. And I would agree, all the movies you pick were good. They were their own thing. But I just think not everything has to be the same tone as the movie that it takes its inspiration from. I don't know. It's just something that's really been bugging me for the last little bit.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
well, since Ruth took a turn picking the movie, what is going to be our movie next week?
Okay. Well, a couple of things, like looking at our banner and then watching Better Off Dead. There was that sequence that in the high school dance where they're dancing.
Yeah.
When I was watching the dance in Better Off Dead and I looked at the banner for our podcast, I thought, how come we haven't done Footloose yet? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's been big on my mind since I've been a kid. It's still, when it comes on TV, I watch it for the musical numbers.
It was filmed in Utah.
Filmed in Utah, so that's a little personal thing. So I just thought, let's try to catch up on some of the things that we're seeing on our banners, and let's talk about Footloose next time. Let's get a little Kevin Bacon action going. Kenny Loggins.
Yeah, that sounds good. We're keeping with the dance theme though, so that's good. Yeah. We're swing kids, and then we're Footloose, so that's good.
Yeah. So like I mentioned last time, I just thought Footloose. Oh, that'll tie in better with what we talk about after Swing Kids. So,
all right, cool.
But yeah, if you guys also want to comment on movies you think spawn good ripoffs, bad ripoffs, if they're even ripoffs, like feel free to do that below. If you agree with Johnny's choices, if you disagree, obviously people are going to disagree with what I thought about Man of Steel and Amazing Spider-Man, but we welcome those conversations. So absolutely comment below, and we'd love to hear from you.
Okay, then for NostalgiaCast, I'm Johnny Craddock,
and I'm Darin Lundberg.
We'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.